Today, Sam Bankman-Fried is sentenced to more than 2 decades in prison, and we speak to 2 legal experts for analysis on his sentence and what it means for the crypto industry at large. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Mackenzie Sigalos. Outside the courthouse where Sam Bankman-Fried was just sentenced over the multi-billion-dollar fraud that he oversaw at FTX. We'll talk all about that in just a bit, but first, let's take a quick look at crypto markets. By noon Eastern, Bitcoin rose back to the $71,000 mark, Ether climbed to $35.78, and Solana jumped to $187. Okay, let's jump right to the sentencing of Sam Bankman-Fried. Southern District of New York Judge Lewis Kaplan sentenced the disgraced FTX executive to 25 years in prison out of a maximum 110 years for the massive fraud and conspiracy that led to the collapse of FTX. Judge Kaplan said SBF had perjured himself on the stand and argued that it's not a trivial risk that he will commit more crimes in the future. He added that in his 30 years as a judge, he's not seen a performance quite like this one from Sam Bankman-Fried in October, which included evading certain questions while on the stand during his trial. Bankman-Fried took the stand once again today, delivering a winding apology statement, saying that he had made bad decisions that haunt him every day. He claimed responsibility for what happened and said that he was sorry that customers were deprived of their cryptocurrency gains. Attorneys for Bankman-Fried were seeking a sentence of 5 to 6.5 years, citing medical conditions, including autism, and that harm to customers would be zero thanks to the bankruptcy process. However, FTX CEO John Ray told the judge last week that creditors would never be fully recovered and called the estate a, quote, metaphorical dumpster fire. Prosecutors were seeking 40 to 50 years in prison, saying that their suggested sentence was appropriate given the extraordinary dimensions of SBF's crimes. Today, Judge Kaplan rejected the entirety of Bankman-Fried's argument that there was no loss at FTX, calling that claim misleading, logically flawed, and speculative. Kaplan presided over Bankman-Fried's trial, which ended in November when a jury found him guilty of 7 counts and held him responsible for the roughly $10 billion of customer deposits that went missing in 2022. SBF's parents didn't speak to reporters as they left the courthouse post-sentencing, but shortly thereafter, a family spokesperson issued a statement saying that they're heartbroken and will continue to fight for their son. Bankman-Fried is expected to appeal today's decision, but his attorney declined to answer reporter questions. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams issued a statement on the sentencing saying that as a result of his unprecedented fraud, Bankman-Fried faces 25 years in prison, forfeiture of over $1 billion, and restitution to his victims. Today's sentence will prevent the defendant from ever again committing fraud and is an important message to others who might be tempted to engage in financial crimes that justice will be swift and the consequences will be severe. Now for some analysis on the sentencing and what it means for the crypto industry at large. Crypto World's Talia Kaplan spoke with Paul Tuchmann, a former federal prosecutor and lawyer at Wiggin and Dana, along with Zack Shapiro from the crypto-focused law firm Reigns.
Paul, you're a former federal prosecutor with experience prosecuting and defending fraud investigations here in New York. You served as an assistant U.S. attorney for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York for more than a decade. So given your experience, I want to start off by asking, what do you think about Sam Bankman-Fried's sentence? Were you expecting 25 years? His lawyers were seeking a sentence of 5 to 6.5 years. Prosecutors were seeking 40 to 50 years. So are you surprised that Judge Kaplan sentenced Bankman-Fried to 25 years in prison, given that represents a pretty significant departure from what prosecutors were seeking?
Yes, frankly, I am a little bit surprised based upon the demeanor and the rulings that Judge Kaplan made during the trial, as well as the arguments the prosecutors made. That Judge Kaplan, both during the trial, but then also during the sentencing proceeding today, generally agreed with the prosecutors on in terms of the nature of the seriousness of SBF's conduct, the loss amount, the fact that he perjured himself. Judge Kaplan found during the course of his testimony at trial. In light of all of those findings that Judge Kaplan made, I frankly found it a little surprising that the sentence was at least a bit higher. Certainly not necessarily the 40 to 50 years that the prosecutors were seeking, but 25 years was on the low end of what I was expecting going into the sentencing hearing today, and then particularly, as I said, after Judge Kaplan reached those findings about the perjury and about the loss amount.
So, Paul, expanding on that, today Bankman-Fried took the stand and had a remorseful tone, quite the contrast from his testimony during his trial. Bankman-Fried claimed responsibility for the collapse of FTX and said he was sorry that customers were deprived of their crypto gains. So do you think those comments on the stand today played into his sentence at all? It's important to note, though, that this morning, Judge Kaplan increased the sentencing guidelines range for Bankman-Fried to a maximum possible sentence of 110 years after finding that he had committed perjury at his trial and knowingly obstructed justice. So it sounded from the get-go that he wasn't going to be lenient.
It did sound that way. And I don't think that the statements that Bankman-Fried made during his sentencing necessarily were part of the reason why he got what I would expect, a lower sentence than I expected to see him get. Certainly, on the one hand, he did express, I don't know if I would want to call it remorse, but he did express regret and sort of sadness for his colleagues at FTX, as well as to the investors, or not so much the investors, but the depositors who lost money. Certainly, he said that he was sad that they lost money, and in some way, it seemed that he acknowledged some kind of responsibility for the fact that they did lose money. But at the same time, importantly, because he has an appeal pending, and therefore anything he says today that indicates that he actually agrees that he did commit a crime, he's continuing to maintain his innocence through the appeal process. And if he was to win an appeal, any admissions that he makes in the course of the sentencing proceeding could be used against him at a future trial. And so for that reason, he didn't fully, I would say, and I think Judge Kaplan agreed in the remarks that I saw quoted, didn't really agree that or believe that SBF had truly been remorseful. And in fact, one of the things that Judge Kaplan said when imposing sentence was that he had a real concern that Bankman-Fried, whenever he concluded his sentence, was in fact a danger to commit another crime like this in the future. And certainly if the statements that SBF made at sentencing to the judge, certainly if those had been successful in the goal of truly showing remorse, that I certainly don't think Judge Kaplan would have reached that conclusion during the sentencing hearing today.
So, Zach, what's your reaction to Bankman-Fried's sentence? Today, Judge Kaplan rejected SBF's argument that there was no loss at FTX, calling the claim misleading, logically flawed, and speculative. Based on everything that happened in the courtroom today, were you expecting 25 years? And do you think the victims will think this sentence is appropriate and fair?
Yeah, thanks. I think 25 years is pretty close to what I would have expected. I would have maybe even expected a little bit lower. The way federal sentencing works in criminal cases is judges have to start by calculating a guidelines-based sentence using an elaborate formula. Those guidelines used to be mandatory in terms of what judges had to sentence people for. Now it's just a starting point. But when you deal with crimes that have big numbers involved, whether that's a large quantity of drugs or in this case a large amount of money that's gone missing, the end output of those guidelines tends to be a really large number. And so it's not surprising the judge would do a downward departure from the guidelines calculation. And that really puts the sentence into a question of what would the judge, Judge Kaplan in this case, think is fair. And we're talking about a white collar crime here, right? A bad white collar crime, a really big white collar crime, a brazen one. But if you look at murder sentences in gang trials in the Southern District of New York, those are often in the 20 to 25 year range. And so I'm not surprised that Sam Bankman-Fried didn't get a 40 or 50 year sentence. I do think that his and his lawyer's performance today were pretty bad. His lawyer, Mark Buchesi, really painted him as sort of a hero of some sort, called him a beautiful puzzle, pointed out his veganism, called him, he read like a Talmudic scholar. I think that really maybe missed the point in terms of how much damage he caused. Of course, there were losses. The fact that the FTX made some lucky venture investments that were able to make creditors whole as of the bankruptcy, notably not in crypto terms, but in the bankruptcy terms, I don't think absolved him of any of the crimes. The fact that he seems to have perjured himself on the stand also certainly didn't help. And the fact that when Sam testified himself today, he was more focused on the facts of what happened than showing contrition to the victims, I think also didn't help. So I think 25 years is a harsh sentence. I think it was in the expected range, but I think that this is just, And what I hope is, I think a lot of the crypto community was skeptical of what sentence he would get. They thought he might get an unreasonably low, maybe below 10-year sentence, and that justice wouldn't be done. And, there were frankly a lot of conspiracy theories about that. And I think that, it's good to show the crypto community that justice does work, at least in this case.
You are, in fact, a crypto-focused attorney. So in what ways do you see this case being a template for the crypto space at large? U.S. Attorney Damian Williams issued a statement saying that today's sentence sends an important message to others who might be tempted to engage in financial crimes that consequences will be severe. Do you think that message will resonate with those thinking of defrauding crypto investors from here on out?
Yeah, I think so. Last time we spoke about this, I mentioned that I think this is really more a story about old school fraud than it is about crypto itself. I think there's one way in which that's not true, which is that the crypto community, I think, has to learn this lesson every couple of years, that the whole ideal behind crypto is creating open source, trustless systems where you can see, using a blockchain or similar tool, where funds are, what the mechanisms are to secure funds, and who has permissions to move those funds. And that obviously doesn't work when you just trust a third party, in this case, FTX. But there are other examples, famously Mt. Gox in the early days of crypto, one of the early Bitcoin exchanges. When you trust someone with your crypto assets, they can move it, right? And we're talking about digital bearer instruments that are easily stolen. So I think, insofar as this is an important lesson to the broader crypto community, maybe it's less towards the people who would commit fraud. I mean, I think this is no different than any other large criminal case in that respect. But for crypto investors, the people who are the depositors who lost money in this case, to really think about who do you trust, who, if anyone, do you trust your cryptocurrency with? Is it better to self-custody or use a collaborative custody model for cryptocurrency, or to use sort of more "quote unquote" trustless, tools on the blockchain to hold your digital assets?
Okay, that's all for Crypto World this week. We're off for Good Friday, but we will be back again on Monday, and we'll see you then.